quickly or whatever. It was crazy to me after I got a Mac how much faster all of that was. So that was super impressive to me. So hardware wise, that's definitely one that I can no longer live without. Um, I don't know if that counts so much. So like probably like YouTube Premium as a subscription. I can no longer stand to watch ads on YouTube anymore, and it's worth every single penny. Particularly being self-taught, I watch hours and hours and hours and hours of YouTube for everything, whether it's fixing my car or trying to learn a new skill. So those would be a couple like absolutely must-haves now.
YouTube Premium. I'm on Levi's family plan. Thanks, Levi. Don't ever kick me out of your.
That's the way to do it. We do that with a couple friend of ours, and then my brother-in-law and his wife, and then it's super cheap. Then you're just splitting that between people. So same thing you can do with YouTube
Whoa,
TV too.
whoa! Splitting things between people. Man, just mute Taylor. Mute him.
Oh, sorry, my bad, Levi.
That's great. Are we ready for the next question? All right. So, if you could go back in time, what is something you wish that you knew prior to starting in the field? What advice would you give, or what would you say? And hopefully the answer is not, don't go into programming. Anyone want to start? Go, Myke.
Oh yeah. That stepping away is oftentimes the best answer to the problem at hand. And it's so hard to convince yourself of that when you're in the moment because you just can't let it go. But I think any of us would agree that once you have to step away for whatever reason, whether it be you have to go to work because it's now 7 a.m. or whatever, eventually you have to step away and you've got to hop in the shower, whatever. And the moment so often you get that moment of just clarity when you step away from something and you have, some nice fresh water hitting you and you just get a chance to breathe. Learning to embrace those moments and forcing yourself into those kind of breaks would be something that I would try and tell a younger me getting into the field.
I can kind of piggyback off of that a little bit. And like I would go back and just tell myself that you don't have to know everything right away. And one of the biggest things to learn is how to learn things, how to find what you need to know, what the best practices are as far as that goes, which I don't know, but I'm learning. But yeah, like knowing where to find the answers to things is to me a little bit more valuable than knowing it just off the top of your head, like memorizing everything or whatever. So if you don't know the syntax for whatever, don't beat yourself up about it because yeah.
I think like for me, if I was gonna talk to my younger self, like I would want to express that like everyone's journey through tech is really different. Like a job at corporate O'Reilly, a job at a startup, a job at Google. Those are all three very, very different jobs and different ways to go in tech. And I think kind of coming up the traditional route, I always thought like there's one way to do tech, and if you don't work at Google, you're stupid. And it's like, why did I think that? Like, you shouldn't think that. Like, there's so many ways to do tech. You can do tech your own way. You can make your own company. There's so many more options than at least I feel like I was shown. And like advice I would say is like everything is a learning experience. Like even if you fail really, really badly, or even if it goes super, super well, like it's a learning experience. Like try to find out what you learn from that because you can do better the next time or change something to make yourself do better. Like just like don't be so hard on yourself. Like it's it's gonna be okay. Like it will be okay.
I think probably the thing that I've picked up, and I think Austin's story here in the group as well. Like one of the things, like best pieces of advice that I got from him too, is like consistency over intensity. Particularly like like learning web development like on the side, like nights and weekends, like trying to do stuff or whatever. Or just learning a new skill. Like that's usually how most of us do it. Like most people think of themselves probably as hard workers. That's what I always thought. But the way to learn a new skill or learning how to learn was always like, like just like cramming as much time as possible, like 4-hour blocks of time into like kicking out a paper or whatever, when I was in college or whatever. And so couldn't really do that with web development because I was already putting in that time, at a job, and then you got kids, and then you got other responsibilities that just crop up. And so for a while I fought with like just trying to figure out how I could cram so much stuff into such little time. And I just get really, really defeated when I couldn't block out like 4 hours worth of time to like learn a new skill or something. But that was the best piece of advice I think I got, was just consistency. Like if you can only put in 30 minutes, do 30 minutes, but do it every day. That's probably the best piece of advice that really helped me kind of like things start to like move at that point then.
I think that's a lot of really awesome advice. You sometimes wonder with those kinds of questions, though, would you have listened to you? Right? You think about your younger self.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the hard part is like,
Oh,
whoa, am I back?
no. Yeah.
Wow. Started talking and it crashed. Like, okay.
Oh, no.
My younger self is trying to travel through a time portal and like just shut this shit down. But it's hard because when you were in those moments, we've all been there. We know that like just hot, heavy feeling of like I have to solve this problem right now, and like there's nothing else in the world that even exists right now because this problem needs to be solved. Whether it's a personal like thing that's not even that important, or like literally your job that feels like it's on the line, sort of thing. And it's so impossible to try and talk yourself out of that, and it's a discipline that like really you only learn with time. So at the very least, if you're early on in your career right now, maybe just something to keep in mind is that it's all normal, and you will learn how to deal with those events, as you're growing in this. But yeah, I don't think that I think anyone's lying if they said, "Oh yeah, I'd listen to that person that said that, no problem."
Right. All right. Are we ready for our next question? So, what change or shift in your career has been the most impactful for your success and your happiness? Has it been a particular job, a technology, a process that's really helped you either be successful or maybe just to be happy as a developer? To mull that one over.
All right. So similar to the last answer, I don't know if this is going to be totally on, but I can say that I can confidently point at an era where things really changed in my process. And this is something that I try and keep in mind when talking to anybody new coming up in the field, is there's so much time early on where like nothing happens because you're learning the basics. You're not getting very far with things, especially not quickly. And eventually, we all come to learn that like we'll never know everything. We'll never know as much as we want to about things. And but eventually, you hit a point where you become comfortable in your both lack of knowledge and awareness that you can't learn all the things, but you also get comfortable saying confidently that I know I can figure that out. I know that I will, as opposed to earlier on where you're just kind of crippled with fear of not knowing if you're going to be able to accomplish something. Once you do it enough times, you are fortunate enough then to say like, I don't know the answers, but I know I'll figure it out. And it's kind of that moment that like I could point to and say things just changed because I let go of so much. And just when the confidence was finally there, a single person can achieve a ton of stuff. And that's a very, very nice feeling of being able to have the confidence to do that. And that was definitely a turning point for me.
It's funny. That is exactly what I was gonna say, is that mind shift of like, again, kind of like what I said before, like you don't have to know everything right away. You don't have to know everything all the time. And so like when I started getting comfortable with like, I don't know, but I know I can learn it, like I know I can figure it out, it feels a lot better.
Yeah, it totally changes the game when you reach that point.
For me, for things that just like things started getting successful or what have you, was probably when I started looking for like remote gigs or as much as people don't give a crap at least or do give a crap. And but we had a dev night about it or whatever it is, Upwork. Just starting to take on jobs like just from there. I'd done the thing where I was doing websites for like, like $500 a pop or whatever for like, local places for just like little brochure sites or whatever. And just thinking about how like I really enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun because it was new. It was like a really great escape for me from like the social work side of things that I was doing at the time. And but I knew it was like never going to be sustainable that way. Like having to like find and then churn out like $500 websites would be super hard to make a full time gig. But that really kind of changed things for me when I started like looking for jobs like remotely, and just picking up stuff, like I said, from Upwork, and then from there, got a couple of different other places to get leads from, and things just really started clicking after that started to happen, and I moved out of that mindset of I just had to find jobs close to me kind of type thing.
For me, so I'm pretty like new in my career. I'd say like I've only been out of college for like 2.5 years, but so I haven't had too many like career pivots or anything like that. But I would say I took like the biggest leap towards like freedom and happiness and everything when I kind of like stopped taking a lot of stuff about my code like personally, like if that makes sense. Like I've been jumped around to 5 different projects at my company in 3.5 years, and I was always like, oh man, like what could I have done better? Like, and it's like nothing. The business didn't want you to work on that project anymore. Like the business doesn't want it anymore. It's not your fault. Like, and it's like I kind of think of my code sometimes like I created it. Like it's an extension of me, and it's like it's not. Like it isn't. Like don't worry. Like you did it. Like good job, but they don't see the person when they see the code. And so when I kind of stopped like taking anything about me or my projects it personally at all, I feel like I felt like a huge relief after that.
All right, great. I think the next question is probably my favorite one of the list so far because I'm super curious. It's just like one of those questions. What is the first thing you do when you come into the office each day? Who wants to hop in?
I mean, I guess I can't. I mean, I work from home, so, but I do have a morning ritual that starts actually at my dining room table, where I kind of plan out my day, respond to emails, hit up different things that I need to respond to, or schedule things out, set up my planner for the day, and then I commute, 30, 40 feet or whatever it is down the hallway into my room. I've got a little like nook where my office is, kind of type thing, where I'm at currently. So as far as first things, I just really get set up for the day, check an email. I've got this full focus planner thing that I'm like really invested in right now with kicking out and prioritizing projects and stuff. So that usually takes me a good 30 to 45 minutes basically. And if I don't do that, I've found that it's really hard to focus the rest of the day and end up like not getting a whole lot done. So that step's pretty crucial.
So, okay, so we're going to just gloss over, coffee has to come first, number one, right? But also, I have the memory of a goldfish, and I'm not really exaggerating when I say that. So I have to take pretty solid, like, notes or, like, something to remind myself what I was doing yesterday, because I won't even remember what my name was. So I kind of review those, but also one thing that I really like to do is kind of make the rounds and and just see what's going on with everybody else at the same time, because things kind of flow from there. Like, what is everybody working on? How does this work? And it just kind of like that first thing in the morning before everybody kind of gets started on everything is a really good time for me to kind of just check in and see what's going on, what's happening. I don't know, see things just pop into your head like, oh, I was working on that, now this, so I kind of make the rounds and review my notes.
I also work remote, so my office is also like 10 steps from my bed. So basically, I just get up, like get coffee, and I kind of like usually like to make some kind of to-do list of what I want to get done that day, because it gives me serotonin to check off each box. Like, so I just like doing that, and also helps me not like switch tasks as much because I kind of jump from thing to thing sometimes. So if I'm like, no, you're getting this done today, you need to do it. So, and then I get on my daily stand up. So that's pretty much the first thing I do.
I kind of have a couple different routines. Kind of depends on what day of the week it is. But generally speaking, I've got kind of two morning sessions. So I try and wake up around like 4, and then crank out whatever emails, some code stuff. I still do freelance work occasionally, so that's some time where I'll do a little bit of work there potentially. Otherwise, catch up on emails. Um, to Megan's point, I love making the rounds in the office, almost like a freaking Bill Lumbergh standing at someone's office kind of thing. But no, I like to go around and chat and then check in, with my business partner, my CEO. That can take upwards of an hour. And so like kind of with my routine of checking in, work stuff and setting plans for the day or week or whatever, I find so often that like, it's damn near 11 o'clock now, like lunch is coming up, and like half the day, like so often is zapped right off the bat, which is why I wake up so early and have that like isolation time of like nobody's awake in the house. Like there's no chance that I'm gonna get interrupted here. So use that for like really hard focus time, and then keep the mornings kind of open. Coffee, of course, and then I've got set days that I usually work from home. And on those days, I'd be curious, especially you two, exclusively remote people. I make a habit out of those days when I'm home, of going down to the coffee shop and generally, not, especially with COVID, like not hanging out in there, but picking up and bringing it home and just having that nice pour over instead of one that I had to make myself. Be curious if you two do any of that. You just straight up wake up, make your coffee at home, go to your desk, or do you like make a point to go out anywhere? I'd be curious because I love it.
I do not go out. I'm ashamed to say I typically get up like 10 minutes before my stand up. I want to have a nice morning routine. I really do. Like I set my alarm for like an hour earlier, have not once been able to actually get up at that time. I want to so bad. You don't understand. Like I live in an apartment. The gym is right there. It's so easy. I could just walk over, but I can't.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
no.
What about you, Taylor? Are you wake up right before things start
Yeah,
cranking too?
I used to say that I was like a morning person, but I'm not a 4 o'clock morning person. So
Yeah.
I'm up somewhere. I'm up somewhere between 5 and 5:30. I'm the morning person at my house. I have two small kids, so I am literally it's literally impossible to sleep in past like 6 at my house. And so yeah, no, I get out of bed, I make breakfast, and I do the coffee. We buy good coffee. I've got a Chemex at home, the whole nine, like, grinding my own beans, all that fun stuff. At a certain point we started paying for like the good stuff because I didn't want to have to go somewhere all the time. I'm in Willard, so it's a little bit of a drive for me to get like good coffee. And so yeah, we do all that at home. I've got all the fancies.
Love it. I'm, Carmen, you mentioned like you'd love to have the morning routine. I'm impressed with the people that can like do the super fast get ready thing. I think like that's everyone at our office. Like they're just super fast. Like I take forever to get ready. Like I have to have like a good 25-minute shower before I can even call it good. Like, and you guys, impressive.
Sounds like things we've learned. Myke needs a better coffee pot, and if you want to become a morning person, have a kid.
I've I've got a pretty decent coffee, but there's just something when somebody else making it, right? Like I don't know. There's architect makes some mean coffee. That's all I got to say.
Architect has great coffee. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
All right, are we ready for our next question? This is kind of a twofer.
Yeah.
So, what tips do you have for remote work? Maybe just productivity or some of the things you've talked a little bit about, maybe routine. And then, kind of the twofer side of this is, do you have some tips for getting a remote job? Like in this area or just maybe not in this area?
These remoters kick off these answers.
I would say like tips for actually working at from your house. The thing that helped me the most was having some kind of set space where you only do work. Like even if it's just your desk in your living room, don't sit there if you're going to play video games or do anything else. Like try to have a somewhat separate space. Like I know it can be hard, but like it helps you switch from work time to home time. And that's like the biggest thing that helped me. I don't always follow that rule. Every once in a while, like I'm sitting on the couch taking a meeting, it just happens. But in general, I try to keep it to one spot is the work spot. And for getting a remote job, I currently have a fully remote job that just kind of happened through my internship. Just applied and like got it. But for finding one, like that's what I'm doing now. I'm only finding remote jobs, like just browsing around. And you just have to go on like LinkedIn or job sites and just look for only remote positions. And especially with like the pandemic and stuff, there are a lot more people that are, they say like open to remote. So just apply and be remote. Like don't give them, like if they say, are you going to relocate? Just be like, I'm not open to relocating at this moment. Like maybe you would be in the future, but like you don't have to tell them that. If they don't want a remote worker, they won't hire one. So, I mean, that's how I've been kind of like looking at jobs a little bit is like just going and seeing if they say remote or go to a company that you like maybe you shop at Chewy for your pets or something. Go see if they're hiring a dev and like see if they're hiring remote devs or anything. Like that's kind of how I kicked off like the kind of browsing job search thing I'm doing now.
Yeah, as far as the like working remote ideas, I think what Carmen said, like that's fantastic as far as like, setting up dedicated space. I think is great. Another big one is like as silly as that is like making sure you get dressed for the day. There's a lot of even like studies about that, like actually improving like your ability to be productive and focused during the day. So every now and again, have a PJ day or whatever if you don't have meetings or whatever. But A majority of the time, like, I still get up, get dressed, as if I was going into an office kind of type thing. Another thing for me, at least personally, like, so I'm very much so an introvert, so I like working at home. I really enjoy that aspect of things. But even doing so, maybe it's just like years and years of social work and being very, very people focused and engaged. I still have to work like one day out in the community somewhere. So I'll pick a coffee shop or something like that and go work somewhere else where I'm just around other people for the day. And then that way it's just not so, cut off from the rest of the world, I guess, kind of type thing, because you can only do so many Zoom meetings. And that be your only interaction for the day with other people outside of your home space. And so as far as finding like maybe like remote gigs here in Springfield or whatever, I'm a freelancer, and so like all of my gigs, I shouldn't say all of my gigs, 90% of my gigs are remote. I still do some stuff local with a couple of folks kind of type thing. But I started off with platforms, like I said, and then built up a decent enough portfolio, got some reviews, put that on a website, and I keep a pretty decent presence on LinkedIn. And so anybody that's on LinkedIn, probably also like anything software or web development related, you probably get 15 recruiting emails a week. And like all of them lead now with like, this job's remote. Like everybody's doing remote now because of COVID and everything. So I think they know that that's a primary ask now. People seem to lead with that very quickly. So you can try that. You can try platforms. There's also a very pretty popular website called weworkremotely.com. That's pretty easy to remember, but they post obviously just remote gigs as well too. So I think that covers it.
I think those are great tips. And I think a lot of us learned that during that pandemic time when we weren't necessarily going to work and we became remote employees accidentally, that if you don't take care of yourself, you stop doing your morning routine, you stop getting dressed, and you just plop yourself down in front of the desk. I've heard that from a lot of people. Suddenly they were like, why do I feel so bad? And it was just like, you realized you hadn't brushed your teeth. It's just, you didn't do the morning things. All right. Anyone else want to chime in on that one, or do we want the next question?
Yeah, I'll echo Taylor's point of getting out. So I worked for a couple of years remote. So I worked for an ad agency for about 8 years, and my wife got in her postdoctoral residency and her internship in South Florida, and so I didn't want to leave my job at all. I loved it, and I was one of very few people who started working remote. We didn't know what the end game was. We didn't know if we'd be staying there in Florida or whatever, and so reach an agreement to work remotely. And that's a different thing when you're doing it in a company where like nobody works remote versus the past 2 years where practically everyone is working remote. So it was a way different situation. And then there was another year I went and worked for another agency that was on the West Coast. Doing remote stuff, and it's crazy because if you would have told me like you're gonna find yourself needing to go like work at a Panera or a coffee shop or something, like I wouldn't have believed it. But for me, somebody who likes to be out somewhere, it was different, having to work remotely like that. And most of the time it was pretty fine, but then it would just get to the point where you would just have days where you don't feel like doing a damn thing, and that's normal anyways, but sucks when again you're at a company where you're one of potentially the only person working remotely. Like you have to you have that added pressure of making sure that you're doing good and others aren't concerned about your work situation. And I found it just magical getting out and working somewhere once a week. So Taylor, I did the same thing every, whatever, Thursday or Friday or whatever it was. I'd go out to a Panera and I'd establish a routine there, right? So it was like, all right, cinnamon roll, chocolate chip cookie, Mountain Dew, some coffee, and just crank. And I found that those were some of my most productive days, which is weird because like when you need to get in that mode, right, that like grind mode where potentially any noise will just set you off and like, you broke my entire concentration, thanks. But for whatever reason, no, it was that change of scenery, and those were some of my most productive days, getting out and working somewhere else.
All right. This is going to be an interesting, I think, question. So, do you think it's better to go to college, a boot camp, or go completely self-taught? And if anyone doesn't have a degree, do you feel like that held you back? Myke looks, he's ready to answer.
I'll jump in. So let it be known that I don't have like a hard opinion on any of these things one way or the other. But most certainly my personal experience, led me down a specific path. There's no answer, right? There's no like, this is the best way to go. Everyone's situation is going to be different. But I think that we're at the point in this industry where we can point to many people that took all those approaches, right? You can point to highly successful people that have no degree, dropped out of high school, whatever, taught themselves everything, didn't go to a boot camp. Like, you can point to these people and they're extremely successful. And then there's other people who are just in like that medium curve. They did all those things. Maybe they're not hugely successful. They're not like a Twitter dev star or, whatever. But they've made a solid life for themselves. The boot camp thing, I don't have a lot of insight to. I know it's a relatively newer thing. And I love that they exist because so often you just really need some basics taught to you. And once you have somebody there kind of exposing you to those things, there's a lot you can do with just a little information. And it might help certain individuals get over that hump, that they couldn't otherwise figure out, how to ask the proper questions or whatever, to start down that path. I can say personally, especially earlier on in my career, I definitely felt like I needed that college education, that computer science like background, because, my peers had that, and like I just couldn't even speak literally, some of the same languages that they were using terms, that polymorphism or, like whatever, using terms like, whoa, man, like you have like a PhD, like what's going on here? And eventually you learn like these are all just bullshit. These terms are so stupid. And like a lot of times, there are individuals that speak this way for, whatever, a multitude of reasons, not the least of which might be some insecurities they may have. And so they speak, these terms that just makes you feel inferior, not having that background. But it is 100% not necessary. Everyone's going to be different. Sometimes that, university background is really going to help, somebody who needs a more structured, type entrance, or hell, maybe they're going into a career that requires it, because that exists. But I don't know. At this day and age, not required, and it's just going to be down to kind of personal traits, learning habits, financial situations, all that. But thankfully, they're not required in a lot of situations. Sorry for the long answer.
I'm going to pipe in here and then I've got to peace out. My son needs to be put down. That sounded like we were euthanizing him, but we are not.
Go ahead, Kevorkian.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway, but with the educational background, like, of course, I went to school for broadcasting, completely separate, no overlap there. But I feel like, and you guys can speak to this more, but like, I mean, after college, you're going to need to keep learning. I mean, you can't just have that check mark and then stop. So I don't know. I feel like there's always going to be that self-taught aspect to it, unless you spend just a crazy amount of money on, I don't know, Udemy courses or something. Like, I don't know what else you would do as far as like extended learning, but It's just things change so rapidly. There's just, I mean, that check mark is good. I think, like you said, for people who need that structure, that ability, or are pressured into that's the path that you're supposed to take. I know my parents thought that was the path that you were supposed to take, is just go to college and that's what you do. But then once you get out, like, the learning just doesn't stop. So it's all going to be a little bit of self-taught in everybody's career.
See ya.
So I'm also kind of like, I'm pretty educated by educated standards, just not in web development or computer science, since that's all self-taught. So I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. And so, it's hard for me to say like that's obviously needed, because obviously I can say, I've got, University of Taylor or whatever you want to say for, my web development skills. But I also can't necessarily discount the fact that I learned a lot of skills that are very helpful to me now, in my degree and just previous life experience or what have you. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm halfway decent at freelancing. Myke, or probably most everybody else on here, could probably kick my butt in some kind of a technical interview, doing the exact same stuff that I'm doing now, but I also have really good skills in other areas that kind of help complement that when I'm trying to get jobs, or kind of help people understand different aspects of what I do currently to help them. So I think, like Myke said, it's kind of like different. It's unique for each individual person. Do I think you need a computer to, some kind of a degree or whatever? No, I don't think you do. I don't think you need a boot camp. I think those are great situations, though. I think if I could have spent the time to do a boot camp, it took me doing this, like, learning nights and weekends, and while also doing a full-time job and other stuff or whatever, like 7, almost 8 years, to where, from the time that I started and first, working on a hacked WordPress site that I found, I was like, oh man, this is really, really cool. To like now, that was like, 7, 8 years down the road. I think you could cut that time down significantly, obviously, if you have either the time or the funds to go to school and do that, whether that's a boot camp or a degree. But I think it's also perfectly legitimate, obviously, to do that without a degree. That's the great thing. The coolest thing about this field, moving from the field that I was in to this field, is really, as long as you can showcase your work, you can show that you do have the skills, people are more than willing to give you a chance. And I think that's really, really cool from that perspective.
I think a lot of what you guys have said is true, but this one actually feels relevant, so I'll add an opinion that from the education side, what I like sometimes see, I guess, is students who come and say, I'm self-taught, or I did a boot camp, I work for X company, I want this promotion, but they won't promote me without a degree. Like, they put bars up in their own organization. So I don't know if you've maybe heard of this kind of thing, or maybe some people just decide they don't want to work for organizations that pull those kinds of things. But I do get students on a pretty regular basis that come in and say, just what's the fastest path? Can I test out of some classes? Like, I just need this piece of paper so that I can move up. And so, while I'm definitely all for free education, I do know that there are some businesses out there that are putting bars up that I don't think I agree with the practice, but that is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, and I know it probably depends on who you want to work for too, because there are just some employers, even a lot of, if you're interested in working for, like, the government, most of those require a college degree.
Right.
So that's probably going to be pretty specific. If you've got some desire to work for NASA or something like that or whatever, since they get a lot of money from Uncle Sam, usually that's a contract related type deal where a degree is probably going to be required.
Right.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm curious too, like, government aside, even like take a look at like our local community with bigger organizations. I imagine that I don't know this, and certainly don't want to speak like ill of any of these companies by any means. Some of them are our sponsors. But like, because they hire in such large quantities, it's going to be natural for people to look for work there, because, you got like ad agencies, whatever, that don't give a rip about, especially on like the development side, like what kind of education you have, as long as you can prove you're good at what you do. those companies are hiring in such smaller numbers that those are quite frankly hard to get into. And so naturally, people are going to be looking at the companies that we have 200 openings for developers, and I have to imagine that there's quite a bit of exactly what you were saying, Tiffany, where like, well, you don't have a degree, like you're not even qualified to even come in for an interview because of that.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Or on the kind of that same vein, we only hire from our intern pool, and interns can only be currently enrolled students.
Yep. Right.
We've got a couple of those locally.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hate that.
No naming and shaming. No naming and shaming.
Nope, none of that.
It's a thing. It is a thing. So I guess research where you want to work. See if they put up those kinds of barriers. Are we ready for our next question?
Carmen, I'd love to hear her
yeah.
thoughts too. Being that you went through a wholly traditional path there. Yep.
Yeah, so I definitely I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and I would say almost every dev I know and work with, I met a lot of my friends through that path. So most of the devs I know and work with have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. And I think that, well, it's definitely not required or anything. It can open more jobs for you. Like if you are really interested in AI or robotics or something that's much more research based, you will probably struggle if you've only gone through a boot camp. Like I took an entire semester class on data structures, and there's an entire semester class over algorithms, and entire semester over testing and all this stuff. And it I haven't taken a boot camp, but I think it would be really difficult to comprehend all of that, plus all the things you need to know about programming languages, plus everything else in a boot camp timeline. But if you're just looking to get into web dev or something that's more common, I don't think AI and robotics work is super common, but if you want to do anything research based, I think that it's pretty important. But if you want to do that, you probably know that, and you might even need a master's degree in that. So you probably already know if that's what you're interested in.
One thing to add on to that I've recently found interesting, at Hearo we've been getting into custom hardware development, and I have found it just so incredibly fascinating and equally frustrating, trying to come from no foundational knowledge of embedded development, that whole world. The learning resources online, day and night difference for what it is to learn, just your run of the mill, web development stuff, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever. And so, that resonates pretty hard. What Carmen was saying about you can't get into some of these jobs without that. And even if you wanted to, it is insanely hard to learn that stuff because the resources are just not out there, and there is a weird amount of gatekeeping in a lot of these these areas of learning. It's bizarre, and it's been. I kind of felt like I was at the beginning of some of the experiences I had coming up in this space, trying to learn this. Like, where are the resources, and why are these people such assholes about this? It's crazy. But yeah, that's true. I mean, anything like that, or higher level, engineering positions, you're not even gonna get a foot in the door, unless you've got bachelor's or master's or higher.
I also wanted to add really quick, I do know one person who's gone through boot camp, and they are in significant debt because of that, more than they would have gone to college for. So if I would say if you're gonna go into debt for something, probably go to college. If you don't have to go into debt, obviously do the one that feels better to you. But I that person I know, he struggles with some of the computer science concepts and stuff, and it kind of hurts to see him that way because I know he's dealing with so much, and it's that's just even the cherry on top is it he struggles a little bit with some of that stuff. So I don't know. That's just what I would say.
Yeah, that's a sad deal. All right. We ready for our next one? They just keep coming, guys. We're just going to be here all night. All right. So, tips for overcoming obstacles. You've got a bug you can't figure out, a feature you can't seem to break down. Something's just, like Myke said, it's frustrating sometimes in equal parts of being awesome, but how do you kind of keep yourself off the tilt?
25-minute showers. But knowing that is absolutely normal. Not that I'm a freaking grandpa or anything, but I've been doing this now for about 15 years. And eventually you'll learn that like this never stops. You're never going to get to the point where you don't have these challenges. Every level you step up, they always exist. And so recognizing that is one of the best things. First of all, like this is normal. And back to what we were talking about earlier, it's hard to talk yourself out of those moments because the pressure's on and you can like physically feel it. It might even be like eating away at you. One of the best things you can do is just step away. And don't do that immediately, obviously, right? It's part of the process, part of the equation is like suffering through it for a little while. But eventually you have to step away, even if just for an hour, go take a walk, go do something, get your head out of it. And you'll be surprised at how quickly you'll go, or hell, go to bed, right? And then wake up in the middle of the night. Oh, I just needed to do this, right? And then hit back at it. It happens all the time. And for these situations where like that moment of clarity may not come, give it time, like just keep letting it ride out, adjust whatever you need to, like if your employer, like if you've got, timelines on the line, whatever, make sure you're communicating with whoever you need to about issues you're running into. Do that. You kind of have to play the game there because you don't want to do it too early, right? You don't want to be the person who's like, I'm not going to be able to get it done, I'm not going to be able to get it done. But you don't want to be that person who's always late with stuff either. So you need to find that middle ground of once you've gained some certainty, like, I'm definitely not going to hit this. Tell whoever you need to about that. And then just let the process work itself.
Yeah, I mean, I know Myke joked kind of a little bit about the showers there, but I definitely do that. Where that's the nice thing about working from home. If I get stuck, like I will, if it's too cold outside, take the dogs for a walk for a little bit or something, like to clear my head. If I've spent like 30 minutes on something that I just can't budge on or whatever, then I'll hop in the shower. And that legit works. And the other thing, I don't know if anybody else does or has heard of like the rubber duck strategy or whatever, like putting like a rubber duck and explaining the problem or whatever. Like I've got little kids, so like I just reached now, there's like a little monkey on here or whatever. So I usually just will plop him over here, like turn away from my computer and like just start talking to him about like what I've tried and what hasn't worked and why it should work. And then it worked. Yeah, there you go. It works. And so, and worst case scenario, start like, getting to the point where you interact with other devs, whether it's in this group or work or just like personally or whatever. I have some, since I'm in the Shopify space, I've connected with a handful of other like Shopify specific devs that I bounce ideas off of when I get stuck, to see if they've come up with something before or possibly, and do the same like when they reach out and they're stuck. I think there's a lot of goodwill that goes a long way when you do that or whatever, and people feel okay with asking you questions. They end up being okay with you asking them questions too. So.
I think I would just like echo everything that's been said. Like, I cannot emphasize enough, like, walking away from a problem, like, it didn't beat you, just walk away from it. Like, the other night, so I've been practicing algorithms and stuff because I'm interviewing, and um, I was working on an algorithm. I literally was logging out every single line, and it was like, it should be equal. It has to be equal to each other. It has to be. Why isn't it? And I was like 10 p.m. and I'm finally just like, I'm leaving. I'm not doing this anymore. I shut my computer and I walked away and like went to go play like a video game. And then within 5 minutes, I was like, oh my God, that's why. And it was like, it just comes to you. Like, I wasn't thinking about it anymore. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it was literally right there, but I couldn't see it because I was so like deep and stuck in it. And also like the rubber duck thing of talking your problems out loud. Just say exactly what you're doing, because you might hear yourself and be like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Like, or you might be like, that's genius. I'm the smartest person alive. So, yeah, both of those things are the best tips.
Yeah, along with the rubber duck, this is right along with it, but it is a legitimate skill that you'll learn to phrase what your problem is and be able to restate it in especially like a way that makes sense, so if you have somebody besides a rubber duck, like you've actually got a dev that you can go to and talk about it. When you find that you're able to break down the description of what's going on well enough that you can explain to somebody who may not be in the project, it's amazing how a fresh mind coming in there will be like, oh, why don't you just flip that around? I'll be damned, that's all that was needed, right? But you have to get good at being able to explain, especially when other people's time is on the line. So I think most all of us have goodwill that we have received and want to give out. But you have to become pretty good about being succinct and making sense. I should take my own damn advice. Speaking too long. But that is a legit skill that you should practice on. Because it'll be that much easier than to know when you're going to that person for help. They'll be like, Carmen definitely knows what she's talking about. She's always able to explain this very well. I can definitely provide some time. So, yeah.
Also helps improve your Google search query too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, knowing what to search for is half the battle sometimes.
It's a skill.
Yep.
Students make fun of us for the ducks because we give the ducks out. We explain the ducks, how they work. They make fun of us, but then later they're like, oh, totally get it. It does. Get a monkey for your desk. All right. So the next one is kind of aimed at those who've done some freelancing. How did you get started as a freelancer? And then what are some of the benefits versus kind of your traditional employment, maybe your corporate environment?
Myke, if you want to take, you've done both. I guess I'll speak to just the freelancer side, because I actually, so my goal initially when I first started learning was to get a job at a local dev agency here in town. One that I'd been following for like a really long time. I thought they did amazing work. That was just always my goal. Like, freelancing was not really ever anything I thought that could be sustainable for me necessarily. Thus the whole, like, because $500 a pop jobs, that's never going to work. And I actually did. I interviewed, and they were super awesome throughout the whole thing or whatever. Obviously did not get the job, but they gave me such great feedback, and that really from there helped me start pushing to looking for other opportunities aside from that. Aside from just finding something locally, like I just thought like that shouldn't be my end all be all. And so from there, freelancing, like that really taking off, really, like I said, was just for me. I know I touched on that earlier, starting on platforms. I just got to the point where I did a handful of jobs, got some good reviews, undersold what I could do and overdid the work like as much as possible, kind of type thing. And that really took off from there. I think being able to do it from the corporate side, or if you want to call it that, or just being able to work for an agency or something like that first, would have been phenomenal, because I think you'd learn a lot more. There's like a lot more filling the gaps. If I could have probably got my foot in the door somewhere else, I definitely could have leveled up my skills more quickly. Aside from just kind of doing stuff on my own, kind of type thing. So I think that'd be great if you could do that first and then move on from there. But maybe, like I said, just because I'm, educating experience in another area, and I just had to learn the tech skills, I had some of those other skills that kind of helped out with being a freelancer as well. So I think as long as you get the experience somewhere, that's the big deal. Just learning to work with other people first. Yeah.
What was the question again? Can you read it again?
So, how did you get started freelancing? And then what are some of the benefits of maybe freelancing versus like your more traditional employment or corporate type environment?
So I got started freelancing. I was doing IT stuff, and then I had that project that gave me the bug for development, and so I started just doing freelance stuff. And same thing as Taylor, right? It was like $500 websites. Um, Shockingly, one of them is still around. I'm like actually in the process of updating it some 14 years later or something. Um, so that's not sustainable, right? It might be, depending on your situation, but like for most people, like $500 website that takes a month or two, like is not going to work out very well. So this is both the up and the downside about the journey of freelancing. Is it's kind of a hard thing to get started in because you really have like a massive ramp up to where you're earning money. Um, and I think we all kind of know like the pros and cons of like doing freelance stuff versus working a traditional job. Obviously, the freedom to set the boundaries to whatever you want when you're doing your own thing. Um, Doing the remote thing, being able to travel, right? All these things. The downsides being, well, if I don't get a job coming in, I might not be able to put food on the table the next month. So you've kind of got these high stake games. But here's the interesting thing: is once you reach the point of like being really good at your craft, um, freelancing is very likely going to net you a lot more money than working, for whatever. If we just look at our local economy, for working for most places, locally, but you have to reach that point, and that takes some time. I would probably be personally, I'd probably be exclusively freelancing, but I got into the startup game and love that, and like wouldn't trade that for anything right now. But I know many freelancers who are extremely successful as far as money is concerned. And there's a lot to be made there. So that's a huge benefit over working your 9 to 5 type setup, but it's high stakes, of course.
Carmen, you want to add anything?
I've never done any freelance work, so I don't know how much like I'd have to add, but all the other people's stuff sounds like pretty good.
All right. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, so I think because we still have quite a few questions, we'll get maybe a couple more, and then I can dump the rest of the questions in the Discord, and if anyone wants to hop in and provide answers, we can do that. So our next one is what is a must-have VS Code extension, or maybe extensions if you have some top picks?
Take it away, Carmen.
I literally just install whatever one is needed for like the language I'm using. Like if I open a Python file and I haven't opened it in that VS Code, it's like, do you want to install this one so we can read Python easier? I'm like, yeah. So I basically just have the like general ones installed. I think I have one, probably the Material UI plugin for making it look nicer. Mine personally is pink. I know a lot of people would hate that because a lot of devs use like dark mode, but I like mine in like light pink. Those are like the main ones I use. That's probably terrible. I don't have that many plugins in my VS Code though. I just use what it gives me.
So I have a handful as far as good ones or like standard ones. So like a handful of like linters, like ESLint for JavaScript, that fun stuff. There's a couple of good React ones if you're in the React game at all. One that's really good that I just started using relatively recently. Axe has an accessibility linter specifically for like HTML. Like so if you're doing a lot of stuff in that to where it like kind of helps give you some hints as far as like semantic HTML to make your code more accessible for people who do have disabilities. That's a good one. And then Prettier, although I kind of hate Prettier a lot of times because it yells at me for stuff I don't care about as much. So, but it probably helps you write better code in a lot of other instances. And then Shopify has one for Liquid since I'm into that. And then Tailwind, sorry, Myke, has a good IntelliSense one That's very, very handy as well if you're a Tailwind fan too.
Yeah, when you have to chain together a class name that's like 3,000 characters, probably helps a little bit. Shots fired already. Oh man.
Yes.
So Megan, I know she's a big fan of GitLens. She messaged that. I know she's in here and probably doesn't have much opportunity to talk, but GitLens, Megan loves it. Not much of I use VS Code, but as I mentioned earlier, JetBrains is my jam. But when I open VS Code for the first time and I'm put off insanely by its default looks, I too install Material. And I go with what is it, Pale Night? Is that the name of the theme, the accent, whatever the color? Yeah, I roll with that one. It's kind of purpley. Big fan of that one. Yeah, I don't know many other VS Code extensions, but those all sounded awesome.
I run Night Owl.
Night Owl, okay.
Night Owl's a good one. It's by Sarah Drasner. Everything by Sarah Drasner is amazing. So.
Well, duh. Which Night Owl? Oh yeah, see it. Night Owl, Light Owl. Nice. Love it. Material. That's good. You can't go wrong with that.
Yep, chat has just become name your favorite VS Code extension. Love it. All right. I think, maybe one more? How many hours a day do you actually write code? Maybe on average. It's not a good sign that we have to really think about it.
I feel like
I thought I muted my mic and I was like trying to figure out what happened. I'm only like 4 or 5 hours a day on a good day for work related stuff. If it's for personal learning and stuff, that's not included. Like a good day is 4 to 5 hours. I have maybe 3 good days a week at best.
Carmen?
Well, I would say 4 to 6 hours. I would say probably 80% of my job is coding. There's some meetings, some stuff. My work's a little weird right now because I'm in between projects. Like we literally just started our new one and we're having to do like a bunch of like new project stuff that's not actually coding. So currently I'm spending 0 hours a day coding at work. However, I'm doing Python code in my like spare time. Probably spend 2 or 3 hours on that for just like personal coding. Yeah, but before when we were working like hardcore on a project, it was probably 4 to 6 hours on work code.
Yeah, so at my job, right, my main jam over at Hearo, I'm not writing code anymore. The occasional stuff, but we're talking, that comes up maybe every couple of weeks where I'm doing something smaller or some prototyping or whatever. So day to day, not much, but like I mentioned earlier, I still take on some freelance work, and when I get into those grinds, it's nights and weekends, and so that adds up to 20, 30 hours a week, whatever, in heavy rotation. But I would echo about the same, thinking back to like agency days development. Certainly no way that like 80+% of the day was spent like writing code. Let's say writing code, like legitimately, 3 to 4 hours, a day. But then there's a lot of stuff around that. You're researching, you're setting up deployment workflows, like whatever. You're doing adjacent stuff. But as far as like actually slinging code, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever.
Yeah, I think questions like that are kind of fascinating, especially from an education standpoint where students do feel like I'm I'm training to be a software developer, and so I'm just gonna write code all day, and then slowly they come to this realization that there's so much more to the job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
As
Just
a
want to
social
write
worker, that's why I
code. What
thought,
happened to
like, yeah,
that?
I thought I was gonna code 40 hours a week, and like,
Right.
nope, don't even come near touching that during the week.
And you know it would just look like a mess if you did, right? Because you would just be tired and sloppy and yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so like the 4 a.m. thing, that's where I like generally reserve that kind of like just focus. Nothing can interrupt. And if you have 2 or 3 hours like that, you can be really productive. And then the rest of the day spent doing emails, meetings, lunches, all that crap. Yep.
I'm on the same page, Myke. I like those wee hours of the morning when no one's up yet, so no one can derail me.
Yep.
Those are
Oh,
great.
it's so nice.
Well, it is exactly 8 o'clock, so we nailed it. There's about 6 questions. One we kind of already answered. So I will put those into the Dev Night chat. We could start some threads if everyone wants to kind of chime in and have some conversation that continues. But with these panels, we always appreciate all of these different questions because that's really what drives the train. And of course, appreciating all of our panelists who came out to, answer and be grilled for hours on live Twitch, Discord, TV here. So thank you so much. All right, any parting thoughts
25-minute showers.
at 4 a.m.?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's steamy.
Oh goodness.
All right. Well.
All right.
Night, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Well,
See
thank
ya.
you.